Hey guys, Jessie here. If you follow me on Twitter, then you probably already know that I've been drawing a portrait of Loki. Because, well, statistically, you're probably one of the people who voted for this. I mean, he won by a lot. That being said, if you follow me, you probably also know that for this video I decided to talk about different Loki theories I found on the internet. I also have a couple of my own theories, but I'll get to those towards the end. I can already tell this video is going to be longer than I usually do, so let's get to it.
Warning, the following video contains spoilers.
Okay, if you're still watching this, then chances are you are a fan of the MCU character Loki. And, like most Loki fans who saw Infinity War, you were likely destroyed by the first 5 minutes of the film. If that sounds like you, then give this video a thumbs up. Now, as we all know, Loki has died before. More than once. Oh no! Loki let go! He fell into the abyss! He's gone! Oh wait, nope. He's alive and trying to take over the Earth. Oh gods, he's been stabbed! He's really gone this time! No, Loki, no! Wait, no. He's disguised as Odin now. Oh no! Asgard's exploded! Loki was in the vault! There's no way he could have escaped! Loki's gone! What are we gonna— Oh wait. He's on the ship and alive. Everything's fine. Hashtag Space Stone. Loki, no! You get the point. Chances are, Loki probably isn't dead. So let's get into discussing theories on why Loki must still be alive. One big theory floating around is that Loki is actually disguised as Bruce Banner. This one's pretty lengthy, so I'm gonna knock it out first. According to the theory, in the opening scene when Hulk fights Thanos, it's still Banner. Yet, when they finish, both Loki and Hulk are off screen for a bit before Heimdall blasts Hulk to Earth. Many believe this is when Loki takes on Hulk's shape, and Banner somehow escapes with Valkyrie, since we didn't see her corpse lying around with the other dead Asgardians. Then, Loki, being the god of mischief, just saunters out and antagonizes Thanos with a butter knife so that he can fake his death. Supporting the Banner is Loki theory is the fact that Heimdall sends Hulk to Earth. Why Hulk? We know Heimdall has heightened sense of sight and hearing. It is said he can hear the flapping of a butterfly's wings 1,000 worlds away.
Yes, and he can hear a cricket passing gas in Niflheim.
However, Heimdall is not omniscient. It's not like he would automatically know Hulk was an Avenger and decide, oh, better blast him to Earth to warn the other Avengers. But still, say somehow he knew. Why blast him back to Earth and not Thor? Someone who is also an Avenger and undoubtedly more powerful. Well, this makes more sense if Heimdall knows Hulk is actually Loki, and was either aware of Loki's plan or figured it out and sent him to Doctor Strange because Loki knows more about the Infinity Stones than Thor. Next, there's the fact that when Banner arrives on Earth, he seems to know a lot about Thanos. Like, seemingly more than he should. He tells Tony that Thanos destroys half the population on every planet he visits, and already has the power in Space Stones. He also tells Tony that Loki's attack on New York was because of Thanos as well. But how can Banner know any of this? Yes, the Power Stone might have been mentioned when Thanos was killing half the Asgardians. And he could assume Thanos got the Space Stone even though Hulk was busy being blasted to Earth before Ebony Isle presents it to Thanos. But it's very unlikely that before the attack, Thor and Loki sat him down to tell him everything else about Thanos right before he shows up to kill everyone. Also, take a look at how Banner says Thanos was behind Loki's attack.
He said Loki. The attack on New York, that's him.
I don't know about you, but it sounds a little like it could almost be Loki trying to shift the blame and say New York wasn't all his fault. Leave it to Loki for that to be one of his priorities. Others have also added that Loki might have also stayed disguised as Banner when he got to Earth because in Ragnarok, Doctor Strange showed reluctance to trust the Asgardian brothers when they went to find Odin on Earth. There was a chance that if he showed up as Loki, Doctor Strange would either attack him or wouldn't believe him about Thanos. There's also the matter of, no matter how hard Banner tries, the Hulk won't come out.
Where's your guy? I don't know, certainly having a thing.
Yes, maybe the Hulk is just scared and doesn't want to come out, but when you consider that maybe Bruce Banner is actually Loki in disguise, then a different possibility comes to light. If Loki was disguised as Bruce Banner, he would really try to sell it to make sure everyone believes it. However, even though Loki could take on Banner's form, he knows he'd be useless as the Hulk because he wouldn't have his powers. He could shapeshift from Banner into the Hulk to keep up the ruse, but he would never have the Hulk's strength, and that revelation could give him away. How might he solve this problem? In perfect Loki fashion, put on a show. Make it look like Banner is really trying to get the green guy to come out, but without success.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards.
You might be saying,
But Banner was fighting with the Hulk, even when no one was looking.
yes, he was. I'll get to that later. Back to the beginning where Thanos is fighting Hulk. Some supporters of this theory think that maybe Bruce Banner was never there at all. They believe that before Thanos even attacked the ship, Banner, Valkyrie, Korg, and Meek escaped with half the Asgardians on a smaller ship, while Thor, Loki, and Heimdall stayed behind to defend the rest. That would mean that anytime we see Hulk, it's just Loki. If you watch this scene, the Loki that offers up the Tesseract could actually be a projection. See, nothing comes in physical contact with Loki, and Hulk attacks Thanos before he can accept the Tesseract. This Hulk might just be Loki in disguise, and might explain why we don't see Loki in a while, and why Squidward here just suddenly has the Tesseract to hand to Thanos, yet no shot of the Tesseract being forced from Loki, either during or after Thanos fighting the Hulk. This could also explain why Thanos was able to wipe the floor with the Hulk, but Captain America was able to hold off Thanos in the fight scene in Wakanda. Sounds solid. Until you slow this scene down. It all happens in a split second and might be easy to miss. Now, when Hulk attacks Thanos, we see Loki actually cast aside the Tesseract and throw himself on Thor to get him out of the way. This explains why no one had to force the Tesseract from Loki, but also implies that it probably wasn't a projection unless Loki has mastered the art of creating physical clones of himself, since he threw himself on Thor and didn't glitch out of existence. It also doesn't explain where Loki went afterward for so long. Anyway, back to the original theory. I want to talk about the Hulkbuster scenes. Now, Hulk can fight, but Banner, on the other hand, isn't a fighter. He's a scientist and a softie, and yet we see him kicking ass in Wakanda. It's a little weird. But who do we know that can fight fairly well?
John C.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I mean Loki. And according to Yggdrasil on Tumblr, if you look closely, you can see Loki's technique in the fight. Unfortunately, I'm not good at being able to tell things like this, so you'll have to watch the scenes and decide for yourself on that one. You can possibly make the argument that Banner wouldn't need to know how to fight well. He would just need to know how to work the Hulkbuster. He is a scientist nearly on par with Tony, after all. Heck, Banner even helped Tony design the Veronica system that the Hulkbuster armor is descended from. So clearly he would know how it worked, right? Well, there was one point my husband brought up when I was discussing this theory with him that I hadn't considered. It took Banner a little too long to get the hang of it.
Yeah, I think I'm getting the hang of it. Wow, it's so amazing, man! It's like being the Hulk, not actually.
Considering Bruce helped design this suit, wouldn't he have figured out the movements before he even left the hangar? I mean, it's not a sure thing. I understand building weapons is different than wielding them, but most likely he would have. But do you know who likely would not have? Loki. Yes, Loki is smart, but he's not a scientist. He's no engineer. Robotic suits just aren't a thing on Asgard. It would conceivably take him a little while longer to get a hang of the suit. Everything about this theory seems to be more or less plausible, except for one part. How would Loki know about Clint, Vision's technology, and Bruce and Natasha's relationship? Well, the theory states that Loki knows about Clint because he mind-controlled him in the first Avengers movie with the Mind Stone. It then states that Loki knows just enough about Vision's technology to get by because he already knows about the stone and because he was there in Age of Ultron hiding as a hooded figure. And finally, the theory states that Loki is a mind reader and got to know Nat in the first Avengers while he was in the cage, and met Banner briefly around the same time and obviously knew him throughout Ragnarok. Well, the part about Clint checks out. Loki did use the Mind Stone on him in the first Avengers movie. However, in the case of Vision's technology, there's a couple problems. Firstly, Loki wasn't in Age of Ultron.
Actually, he was, but it was cut from the movie.
Even so, he wasn't a hooded figure. From what I understand, Joss Whedon really wanted Loki to make a cameo in Age of Ultron. He was to appear in Thor's vision as a little reference to the fact that Loki has taken the throne. This will become important later. Thor was to ask, "Oh, what would Father say?" Then Loki imitates Odin's voice and Thor's like, "That is uncanny." It's sort of like his subconscious is telling him that Loki was imitating his father. But Thor would never make that connection. Now, back to the hooded figure. There was a hooded figure in Thor's vision. It appears very briefly, and I know it's a stretch, but one could maybe assume this is Loki. However, even if this hooded figure was Loki appearing in Thor's vision, or even if Loki's scene hadn't been cut from the vision, that's just it. A vision. It's not the same as if Loki was actually there and observing what was going on. Finally, onto the claim that Loki knows of Nat and Bruce's relationship because he's a mind reader. While Loki did meet Nat and Bruce at different times, he never read their minds, because that's not one of the things Loki can do. When Loki meets Nat in the cage, he isn't reading her mind. He only knows what he knows about her because Clint told him those things while under Loki's control. However, Loki can read people. Sort of like how false psychics give a cold reading to appear like they know more about you than they do. In this meeting in Infinity War, he could pick up on Natasha's actions toward who she thinks is Bruce and run with it. So, while this theory could be plausible and has a lot of good points, it's these last points that are a pretty big weakness to the theory. Though it doesn't quite mean that this theory is impossible. Okay, now let's get on to the other reasons why fans believe Loki is still alive. The rest of these are short, so it's more like a list. 1. The clues from Marvel. Marvel has stated that Loki will play a key role in defeating Thanos. Stabbing Thanos with a tiny dagger doesn't exactly seem like a key role. Plus, Loki knows better than anyone how strong Thanos is and how powerful the stones are. The fact that he would attempt to take him down with the tiny dagger is a little absurd. Chances are, there's more to his death than meets the eye. Tom Hiddleston also mentions in a recent interview that chaos isn't something that's threatening to Loki, and that everything is fine. Fans have taken this to suggest that Loki is alright and hasn't actually died. Many also believe the fact that Tom Hiddleston signed a 6-movie deal means that Loki isn't dead. However, the next movie would be the 6th, and this doesn't necessarily prove Loki lives, as he might just appear in flashbacks in the next movie. Then Marvel fans are also saying that if the Russo brothers really wanted to make Loki's death believable, they would have had Loki using his illusions, and Thanos seeing right through these illusions and then killing him. The fact that Loki seemingly didn't use any of his powers, save for conjuring a toothpick, makes it seem that he has perhaps faked his death again. All that said, who knows? Maybe Marvel is just having an elaborate joke at their fans' expense. Pretend to kill off the trickster god, watch as his giant fan base blows up when they're told all deaths are permanent and to move on to the next stage of the grieving process, then pull a "just kidding" in the sequel when somehow Loki comes back and actually performs his key role in defeating Thanos. After all, Marvel is huge on secrecy of their movies. Heck, when filming Deadpool, they shot a whole scene that was never going to be in the movie, just to throw fans off the scent, which is actually really cool when you think of it. Too many people out there spoiling crap before the movies come out. Number 2. Loki's cryptic speech. Loki is known as a silver tongue, so his choice of words is always important. Many believe that Loki was trying to tell Thor that he has a trick up his sleeve that may end up saving him. There's the line, "I promise you, brother, the sun will shine on us again." The fandom equestrian on Tumblr says, he sounds way too sure of this for the weakest attempt at murder that anyone's ever seen to be his plan. Then there's undying fidelity, and the fact that he makes a point to address himself as God of Mischief. Many fans think that this was Loki trying to hint at Thor that, hey, I'm about to fake my death again. Number 3. The fact that Loki was just gone for a while and then just saunters back on screen with a "if I may interject." Before Loki disappears, he's afraid, but when he returns, he's all cocky and arrogant. This could imply that it was one of Loki's clones.
But you can't touch Loki's clones. Objects pass right through them.
Yes, we have seen that happen, and I also believe that this could make this theory busted. But we've also seen Loki fake his death by getting impaled. There's a theory that Loki actually can make solid clones of himself. He either uses it sparingly because it takes more power, or he chooses to let objects pass through them to make it appear as if he can only make holograms, something that could play to his advantage. And also because he knows it annoys Thor. Others also believe that since Doctor Strange can make physical clones of himself, then Loki has probably also mastered this, as he's had over 1,000 years to perfect doing so. I mean, watching the films, it appears he has gotten better at this over time. In the first Avengers, his clones still glitch out, especially if he makes more than one. But by Ragnarok, his clones are more stabilized and can pass for the real deal for longer. Probably why Thor chooses to throw things at them so often. Number 4. Another reason people don't believe Loki is dead is because he didn't revert back to his Jotun form, stating that after he dies, the magic keeping his Aesir form should disappear. A lot of this comes from Loki repeatedly alluding to the fact that he's a frost giant, saying, "I'm not Asgardian," and that he's the rightful king of Jotunheim. However, I'm not so certain on this one, because it was Odin's magic that made Loki look Asgardian, not Loki's. Odin changed Loki's form when he found him as an infant. So, one could argue, if Loki was ever going to revert to his Jotun form, we might have seen it when Odin passed on. But even then, it's not a sure thing, because Odin's magic is supposed to be all-powerful. He's the All-Father. Like, the fact that Loki was even able to put a spell on him for that long was a big thing.
It took me quite a while to break free from your spell. Frigga would have been proud.
But then again, the mentions of Loki being a frost giant might have been an attempt to draw the audience's attention to this fact as a clue that he might not be dead. And finally, number 5. Loki's last words. The last thing Loki said before he died was to tell Thanos, "You will never be a god." Many have taken this to suggest that Loki has survived because he's a god and can't be killed so easily. Okay, now time for my theories. But first, some backstory. You may have seen the photos floating around that were leaked from the set of Avengers 4. Really, I'd be surprised if you hadn't, because they've been everywhere. Now, normally I wouldn't talk about leaked photos because, like I said, too many people like to spoil stuff before a movie even has a chance to come out. And I don't want to be that person. However, I'm making an exception this time only because, 1, most of you have probably already seen these, and 2, I have a feeling that these could just be misdirection, due to Marvel being big on secrecy of their films. So, chances are I won't actually be spoiling anything. But just in case you are afraid that the photos might be real scenes and don't want to see them just in case they may actually be spoilers, here's your chance to click away before I show them. Alright, we all good? Everyone ready? Okay, if you're still here, you better be ready to see these photos. I'm about to show them now. Here's your last chance to click away. I'm going to show the first photo in 3, 2, 1.5, 1.25, 1, boom. There it is. This photo shows Tony Stark wearing a SHIELD uniform, kind of like the uniforms here of the agents flanking Loki SWAT team style. And here's another photo of Tony Stark along with Captain America and Ant-Man wearing unknown wrist tech that many are speculating to be time-traveling tech similar to what Cable used in Deadpool 2. There's also some photos of Loki and Thor as they appeared in the first Avengers movie. Now, assuming all this wasn't leaked intentionally as misdirection, again, Deadpool shot an entire fake scene for misdirection, then it looks like Tony is either going to acquire or invent some time travel tech and travel back in time to where Loki was attacking New York. I'm betting he will invent it himself, because in these shots, Tony has gray hair, implying that the next movie will take place several years after the effects of Infinity War. Now, the reason I think Tony chooses this route is that during the time between Infinity War and the next movie, everyone is going to be trying to figure out a way to reverse what Thanos has done, and someone will remember that Loki knew a lot about the stones because a few years prior he had the Mind Stone and was pursuing the Tesseract, which contained the Space Stone. Then, Thor will be asked about Loki and if he thinks he can get Loki to cooperate, and he'll inform them that Thanos killed Loki. Knowing there's no other way, Tony will try to invent a way to travel back to where Loki was attacking New York, so that he can either find a way to acquire the Mind and Space Stones himself, or more likely, strike a deal with Loki for his help since he knew at the time the Mind Stone was in Loki's spear, and the Space Stone was in the Tesseract, which Thanos sent Loki to retrieve. Even if they can't borrow the stones due to paradox, they'll still likely need Loki's info on Thanos. Now, chances are, past Loki isn't going to be too willing to help future Tony, so Tony would need to convince him. Assuming telling Loki that Thanos wins and wipes out half the universe and his people doesn't work, informing Loki that he dies by Thanos' hand might, because Loki is terrified of Thanos, especially if he fails to fulfill his task. I mean, the other did tell him what would happen if he failed.
If the Tesseract is kept from us, there will be no realm, no barren moon, no crevice where he cannot find you. You think you know pain, he will make you long for something sweet as...
And there's also how Loki looks like he's already been tortured in this post-credit scene of Thor. His face looks burned, his eyes have great dark circles, and his voice sounds raw. Probably from screaming. Even his teeth look rotted. In the beginning of Avengers, he has apparently already healed a bit, but still looks like crap with the dark circles and sickly pallor, and is clearly weakened. But he does seem to get better as the movie progresses. It's theorized that he was tortured by the Chitauri before the post-credit scene in Thor, where it seems Thanos could be putting him to work, something Loki agrees to in order to save himself. By the time he opens a portal to Earth in the beginning of Avengers, he's healed from the torture but becomes greatly weakened by the mass amount of energy it took from him to open the portal. If Loki is terrified of Thanos, it would explain why Loki seemingly puts on such a big show in the Avengers, and yet doesn't seem to be trying too terribly hard to get what he claims he wants. After all, he does say in Thor, he never wanted a throne, he only wanted to be his brother's equal. A point I'll bring up again later. Might explain why he allows himself to be captured 3 times. Even Cap and Iron Man are suspicious of this.
I don't like it.
What, Rock of Ages giving up so easily?
I don't remember it being that.
Plus, at least one of the times he was captured, he could have easily fled. Looking at you, superhero fight. There are a couple places in the first Avengers movie where this could even tie in. Many believe Tony is going to dress up as a shield guard and take the stones before Thor uses the Tesseract to take Loki back to Asgard. That is one possibility. However, I think Tony might possibly take the stones before the scene where Loki crashes the Science Gala and then brings them back later in the timeline, but before Loki has Selvig set up the machine atop a Stark Tower. The reason for this is this line after Thor rips Loki out of the plane when he's captured the first time.
I don't have it. You need the cube to bring me home, but I've sent it off I know not where.
Now, it's assumed that either he's lying or telling a half-truth, having given his mind-controlled minions the cube, but not knowing exactly where they are at that time. Maybe they went out for donuts, he doesn't know. But what if future Tony was able to convince past Loki to hand it over, and he literally means, I sent it off, I know not where.
Okay, but then why does Loki still have the Mind Stone when he crashes the Science Gala?
Honestly, I don't have all the answers on this one, but luckily the rest of this theory doesn't rely heavily on this point, as the outcome is the same whether Tony goes back for the stone before Loki crashes the Science Gala, or if he does it when Thor is about to take Loki home. Chances are, all this is misdirection anyway, and this theory is based on speculation over scenes that won't really be in the movie. But coming up with these theories is fun, so let's continue. Maybe for fun, try to fill in my plot holes in the comments. Anyway, as for why future Tony wouldn't just try to stop Loki from destroying a good chunk of New York while he's already out and about messing with the timeline, that would be a really big thing to change. Yeah, it'd suck and it'd be hard not to attempt, but Tony's probably smart enough to realize that changing something that big, albeit awful, runs the risk of creating further chaos. Not to mention, it was this event that really brings the team together into being the Avengers. Now, if Tony does go back in time to see Loki, then based on any time travel movies and shows I've seen, Once you go back in time, it means you have always done so, meaning that Tony always went back in time to see Loki. Remember in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are in Hagrid's hut and suddenly someone throws strange rocks at them, conveniently alerting them to Fudge's arrival so they can escape? Then later in the movie, Hermione uses the time turner and they go back to Hagrid's hut to save Buckbeak, and future Hermione realizes Fudge is coming and their past selves aren't leaving, so she throws those same strange rocks at them. Yeah, like that. This would mean Loki would have always known that something would happen with Thanos, and that he would die. Just maybe not how or when. That being said, this branches out into two possibilities for me. Possibility 1. At the time Thanos attacked the Asgardians, Loki might have realized it was his time to die. Perhaps when Tony informs Loki of the perils of time travel and screwing up timelines, and after enough time to think about it, Loki knows he needs to die to advance the timeline and/or save Thor. There's a chance that Loki just didn't try to fight it because he knew this is how it was always supposed to end. If this were the case, then this would be a way for Loki's death to have more meaning. It might also explain why a powerful sorcerer would attack Thanos with a butter knife. Because Loki never really intended to come out alive, but he wanted to make it look like he tried. That being said, God of Mischief. This brings me to possibility number 2. If Tony does go back in time to make a deal with past Loki, and Loki discovers that he dies at the hand of Thanos, he'd have quite a while to think about his death. Long enough to realize that he could die without dying. If he had to die in order for Thanos to move on, then he would make him believe it. This might even tie into Loki taking Odin's throne at the end of Dark World. Perhaps Loki didn't fake his death and impersonate Odin because he wanted the throne, but because he was terrified of Thanos and was hiding. Meaning that once Thor exposed him in Ragnarok, he knew his days were numbered, which would then give him more reason to try and fake his death again until Thanos was no longer a threat. This would tie back into the Banner is Loki theory. If Loki was desperate for everyone to believe he was Banner, it could explain why he might pretend to argue with the Hulk when seemingly no one was looking, just in case someone was. Keep in mind, there could always be a character off-screen but within earshot that Loki's putting on a show for. After all, he did have practice learning how to keep up appearances when he was impersonating Odin for several years. But what do you guys think? Do you have your own theories? Let me know in the comments. Also, tell me what you think of my Loki portrait, especially if you're one of my followers who voted for me to draw this. And be sure to follow me on Twitter if you'd like to vote on who I should draw next. Alright, it's time for a break to feature this piece from digital artist Rosen Simeninov from Bulgaria. If you'd like to see more of his work, then check out his links in the description. Also, if you'd like a chance for your work to be featured in a future video, then submit your art to me via social media. All my links are down below. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed these theories as well as this portrait. I know this video was longer than usual, but I guess that's just as well, because drawing this portrait took about 24 hours to complete. But I regret nothing because I actually like doing these, and I'm not quite sure why I haven't started doing more before now. Oh well, better late than never, right? If you'd like to see more, then check out my other videos to the right. Also, if you haven't already and you'd like to be, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and bell icon so you don't miss out on any future videos. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week. Bye!